opportunity to speak today. My name is Jessica Corwin. I'm the chair of the Sunderland School Committee. I'm also a licensed teacher who has taught in urban, suburban, and rural districts in Massachusetts. It was my experiences teaching in rural Hatfield that drove me to run for school committee. Due to funding constraints, rural schools in my area are far more likely than larger districts to have health insurance benefits with high costs to employees. When I worked in Hatfield, the town was only able to contribute 50% toward the cost of my health insurance premiums because the other 50% came out of my paycheck. When I had 2 kids in daycare, my daycare bills actually exceeded my take-home pay. In other words, I was working only for health insurance and my family was otherwise entirely supported by my spouse's job. So single parents can't afford to work in districts with such low benefits. 18 of the 20 lowest paying school districts in the Commonwealth are ones that receive rural aid. Over and over again, I watched beloved Hatfield colleagues leave the district to work in larger and higher paying districts to the south. This turnover hurts students. Please understand that rural towns are not luxuriously underpopulated suburbs. We have small tax bases and many of our towns have already increased our tax rates to some of the highest in the state. My own town of Sunderland has passed 3 overrides in the last 6 years just to remain operational. Rural poverty is a very real challenge. Approximately 1/3 of Sunderland students come from low-income families, and these children face unique challenges because of the rural isolation and lack of access to resources. The Student Opportunity Act was meant to provide assistance to students like this, but due to our declining enrollment, more than half of rural school districts have only received minimum funding increases after the first 4 years. This bill is essential for rural communities to provide the high-quality education for which Massachusetts is known. As a parent, teacher, and school committee member, I urge you to report out favorably on this bill. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your service on the school committee, too.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chair Garlick, Chair Lewis, and members of the Joint Committee on Education. My name is Joey Pisani. I'm 17 years old and a senior at Gateway Regional High School in Huntington. And most importantly, I love Massachusetts. I love our Commonwealth enough to not only note the incredible accomplishments within the education system, such as universal school meals, but also where there still is work to be done to ensure that every student from the Berkshires to Boston are receiving an equitable, high-quality public education. That's why myself and many others from Gateway traveled here to testify for you today. Because currently our school is not guaranteed a sustainable future, largely because of a simple factor that shouldn't determine the quality of our education in schools, our zip code. I do the announcements every day at school, but many can't hear my voice as the intercom system currently isn't working, making it difficult for students and teachers to get updates, and as you could imagine, could pose a potential safety concern. The state's Rural Schools Commission released a detailed report, which I believe you all got, which recommended that $60 million be allocated to rural school aid. This past budget cycle, a historic $15 million was allocated to it. However, $15 million is still only 1% of the recommendation. While I may be starting to get some senioritis, I could not afford to only do 25% of an assignment, as that is a failing grade. The Student Opportunity Act, as earlier mentioned, was a landmark piece of legislation, and rural schools are expected to get less than 1% of that funding. Once again, a failing grade. From regionalization costs to transportation reimbursement and equities, our rural schools are struggling to keep their doors open. And families in towns and cities with students are struggling because they currently are having to pick up the bill. Teamwork is a very important thing to me, and this legislation filed by our teammates in this effort, who themselves are a fabulous team, Rep. Blay and Senator Comerford, H.3567 and S.2388, if passed, which couldn't happen without a favorable report today, would address these issues facing our rural schools. As I prepare to walk across the graduation stage in a few months and throughout my education at Gateway, my goal has been to leave our school better than how I found it. I look to the 4th graders who you'll be hearing from shortly, who attend Chester Elementary, which is where I personally started my Gateway journey. Rural school students are the future. Future students, electricians, Dunkin' baristas, and even future members of this committee. I hope to do everything I can to make sure that those students have the best Gateway experience possible, and I know this bill could help with that. To close with some slightly changed lyrics to Neil Diamond's song, Sweet Caroline. Why rural schools aren't equitably funded, I can't begin to know, but then I know that this legislation would help them be strong. Help us Gators, we are the future, we believe in you to come along. A favorable report on this legislation would be so good, so good, so good. Thank you.
Well done, thank you. That was terrific.
Really, how am I supposed to follow that?
I
You
know, you're in an unenviable position.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Todd Gazda, and I am the Executive Director of the Collaborative for Educational Services in Northampton. We serve 37 member districts in Hampshire and Franklin County, most of whom are rural districts. This is my 22nd year in public education, and I have been a rural school educator for a large part of that. I've been a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. I am also the product of a rural education, having graduated from Gateway Regional in 1988. So the funding challenges facing rural schools are nothing new. I can remember my father, who was principal of Gateway Regional in 1980 when I was 10 years old, having to deal with the cuts that he had to make in his teachers because of Proposition 2.5. That has been exacerbated by industry leaving the area, what industry that we did have. And so these challenges remain. You have taken action already to help mitigate that, and it's appreciated. One of the challenges, though, is that superintendents in our area don't know whether they can count on it continuing. That's one of the reasons that this is so critical at this juncture. It's important to remember that for regional schools and communities, the schools are the heart and center of those communities, focusing not just on education, but also serving as community centers. As a child, I can remember going to the elementary school for the local raccoon dinner. Just let me trust me, raccoon, skip it. But the side dishes were wonderful. But I just want to point out that it is important for rural schools to support their communities. In order to do so effectively, we need the supports that are in this bill. And that's why I'm really here to ask you today to support our districts and recommend favorable passage of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, and Representative Altrino, Vice Chair of the committee, has joined us. Good to see you. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your testimony. I don't know, Dr. Gazda, if you're the right person. You don't cover Berkshire County, right?
No.
With your collaborative? Okay.
We just about everything but.
But Berkshire,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
At some point, maybe we can talk about if to my colleagues as well, maybe not
There
now,
is
but
no
I know there was.
educational collaborative in Berkshire
Okay,
County.
I
so
know
we do
there
a
was
lot of work
there was a lot of work on the regionalization effort in southern Berkshire County that just unfortunately failed to get voter support. So would like to explore that a little further as to what happened there and how we respond to that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Let's see. Next up is Mark Blatchley, to be followed by Deanna LeBlanc, and then we'll get to our students. Okay. Is Mark Blatchley here? No. Okay. Is Deanna LeBlanc here? Okay. Welcome.